everyone. I'm going to just give a couple more minutes for some additional people to jump on here. I know it's 4:31 here, but I think I anticipate some more people joining us. So I'm just going to be back with you in a minute when the group grows here. I think maybe just being mindful of everyone's time here, maybe we can get started and other people that join us can catch up. I do anticipate more people on the call. We have, I think maybe we can just go around and I think we have some new people here that haven't attended our meetings in the past. So at least one I see on the list here. So why don't we start? I'll ask you to introduce yourself. I'll just go in the order that I see on the screen for participants. So Sam Patterson, you'd like to?
Yes, I'm currently a lame duck member of the
I think you're
Falmouth
still
Select
muted,
Board.
Sam.
Oh,
I hear him.
yeah, can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Still not hearing you. I don't know.
Oh, the rest of us can hear him.
Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. Mine was muted from an earlier call. So go ahead, Sam. You try.
Yeah. Sam Patterson. I guess you could say I'm a lame duck member of the Falmouth Select Board. I'm not running for another term, and our election is May 16th. I am running for the Municipal Light Plant Board here in Falmouth. I have an engineering technical background and some in communications, so I'm hoping that I can help Falmouth put a fiber optic network in.
Oh, all right. Interesting. I'm in the same boat in terms of my final year on my fourth 3-year term here in Fairhaven, and I've already announced that I'm not going to run again next year. So, but thank you, Sam. So next is Brian Espinola. Similar last name, but doesn't have the D in it like mine. Go ahead, Brian.
Hey, how are you? Yeah, so I'm a senior IT analyst for the City of New Bedford. We've gone through some part for the for broadband, and we did an initial kind of like a feasibility study, but we're doing another one, and we're going through and trying to select candidates. We have the application in, so we haven't gone part to finish the application. It's kind of like being reviewed right now so that we can pick out the candidates. But I think might end up with the CTC company they're going to do another port.
Yeah, Brian is referring to the digital equity program consultant through MBI program.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I see. Yes, and Fairhaven, which is a similar thing, the town is working with a consultant on that same program. So thank you. So next is Keith Nobo, Westport.
Yeah, hi. This is Keith Noble from Westport. So I'm the IT director for the town. Recently we just finished installing fiber optic backbone to all our town buildings, and we're looking to expand that out to hopefully to the community. We're in the process of doing, getting in the votes for our municipal light power plant at the moment. Coming up for the next town meeting. So hopefully we'll get a positive results there.
All right. Thank you. And Peter, am I pronouncing your name right when I say Chase, or is it Chassis?
No, it's Chase.
Chase. Okay.
Yeah, Peter Chase, Director of Media for the town of Dartmouth. I'm a staff member on our municipal broadband study committee. Just that's from Dartmouth. That's it.
All right. Thank you. Let's see. We have Tom Newton.
Hi, all. I'm Tom Newton. I'm the chairman of the Wilbraham Broadband Advisory Committee. That's about it. Nothing more
All right,
exciting.
good.
Just got off jury duty. That's exciting.
Oh, all
Glad to
right.
be home.
And Sean, I know you jumped in there for a bit, but why don't you go ahead and tell people who you are?
Sure. My name is Sean Gross. I'm the digital equity program manager and broadband management program management consultant for the city of New Bedford. And as Brian was alluding to, we started off with a initial feasibility study looking specifically at municipal broadband with entry point. And then to complement some of the work that we're doing around digital equity work, we applied for the program through MBI, the digital equity program that allowed us to engage in pre-selected vendors that MBI had already pre-qualified, and actually we just submitted earlier this week our proposal to MBI that came from a consultant named CTC.
All right, thank you. And I see Sean Powers just jumped on here. Sean, you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. Sean Powers. I'm the chair for the Fairhaven Broadband Committee.
All right, thank you. And Sean Gonzalez.
Got a lot of Sean's here today. Sean Gonzalez, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance Community Broadband Networks Initiative. And I am near neighbors with Sam. I'm based in Mashpee, even though our organization headquarters is in St. Paul, Minnesota. We're a national organization, and we'll get into that a little bit in a bit. And CTC is excellent. We know Joanne Hovis and those guys very well.
All right.
I should say that I'm a senior reporter and editor for and run our website.
All right. Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to let the group know that one of the things we've discussed is in our, I brought up at the last meeting, we had a discussion briefly about an opportunity to comment on an NTIA in a comment period they have going, which runs through the end of this month. I think the deadline is first of next month, if I'm not mistaken. And we have, I did reach out because at the last meeting, Cheryl Koss from MBI had said that the MBI was going to work on, studying those 24 questions that the NTIA had on their website that were basically the subjects that they wanted comments on, and they might provide some guidance or direction to us. And but I hadn't heard anything, so I reached out to her and Josh Eichen earlier today, and Cheryl responded saying that she'll try to join us around 5:30. So we have on our list to talk about that a little bit, but we'll try to time it up so that she's available. She did say she might have her young child with her on her lap, so it may be limited the amount of time she can spend with us, but so we can time it up for that. And so maybe what we can do is jump right into the discussion about advocacy. So that's one of the things that when this group was initially formed, and some of the people are here today were not, well, I should say there were some people when we initially formed the group who attended those meetings at that time who are not on this call right now, but some expressed as one of the major points of concern is our efforts to impact the issues locally, regionally, nationally, with advocacy. So Yeah, that's one of the reasons why in a prior meeting, our friends from Falmouth had mentioned Sean Gonzalez, and the work he does in his organization, and then thought that he might be a good guest speaker for our group. And I just noticed Courtney Bird from Falmouth just signed on. And but why don't you take it away, Sean, and just tell us about your organization and what you think you could find in, we could find in synergies working together with you.
Excellent. So yeah, so I don't know. I've got some things that I'd like to share. So so the Institute for Local Self-Reliance has been around since 1974, just about as long as I've been alive. I was born in 71. I come from a print reporting background, worked at the Cape Cod Times for years, went to work in the PR business, and have been with ILSR now for 3 years. But ILSR has different initiatives. The overall organization is basically an anti-monopoly focus about empowering local communities to really seize their economic futures and so forth. And so the CBN program, the Community Broadband Networks Initiative, we are the leading national organization on all things community broadband. So we are the Amazon storehouse of information, if you will, on community broadband networks across the country. We've been tracking this for 15 years. So we're talking about municipal networks, electric co-ops, telephone co-ops, public-private partnerships, and anything that you put under the community broadband network umbrella. Our website, communitynets.org. It's pretty much like a daily news site. We've published over 4,000 stories. We have dozens and dozens of reports and fact sheets and explainer vids and case studies. And we've done our fair share of submissions and advising Congress staffers or White House staffers on issues as it pertains to, for example, like the rescue plan rules and how that money could be spent on broadband. Chris Mitchell is the director of our program, and Chris Mitchell there's probably two people in America that know more about broadband than Chris Mitchell. And he knows all these folks well. And so his network and the network that I'm building as well, I think can serve this group well. He also hosts a weekly podcast that is excellent called Community Broadband Bits, where he's in discussions with folks like yourself that have built or are in the process of building networks all across the country. We also do a live stream show called Connect This. There's 4 regular guests. Doug Dawson, who did the feasibility study for Falmouth, is one of the regular guests. He's probably one of the 2 people in America that knows about as much about this as Chris does. Kim McKinley, who I'll mention in a moment, with Utopia Fiber, and then Travis, who owns USI Fiber, which is a private internet service provider in the Twin Cities. So Massachusetts right now, as you all are fairly well aware, particularly after Josh, who I know well, presented to this group a few weeks ago, you can see that the state's broadband office is pretty much focused on adoption issues, digital equity programs with some infrastructure money, I think, for mostly Western and Central Massachusetts. So it's really this focus on digital equity. Now, let me just say that digital equity, working on improving adoption rates with ACP and other measures, digital literacy devices, is super important. But our view, generally speaking, is that it doesn't really do anything to address the root causes of the access challenge, which is the infrastructure question or the lack of competition in the market, to say nothing about reliability, affordability, or ubiquitous access community-wide. So we've got, BEAD's not the only program out there, but it's definitely the biggest. So we're in the process of this, once in a generation federal investment in expansion of broadband access with a lot of money for infrastructure. Frankly, the rules for spending on broadband infrastructure with rescue plan money are far more flexible than with BEAD. I think BEAD was essentially designed to pretty much funnel most of that money to rural parts of the country on this oversimplified and not really true idea that the broadband gap really is, or the digital divide is really between like urban centers and rural America. There's actually there's far more people in urban areas that don't have access to broadband than in rural America. But nevertheless, that's kind of how the rules are. And so, as you know, each state's going to get the $100 million from BEAD. And then the additional funds will be based on this formula that counts the unserved and underserved locations in each state based on the FCC's very flawed data. Now, the estimates I've seen for Massachusetts is that Massachusetts is going to be on the low end of BEAD funding. One estimate, which I actually linked to in a piece that I wrote about this group last week, I think it was, right, Bob? I think it was about 173 million in BEAD funding, maybe for the state. So when you're thinking about infrastructure, it's not a lot. And it feels to me, my sense is that at the highest levels of state government, they kind of feel like the infrastructure money should be funneled mostly to, obviously, the unserved locations, which BEAD requires be served first before you get to the underserved. And by underserved, the definition in the infrastructure bill is people that don't have access to households that don't have access to 120 megabits per second connectivity. So that's why I think that, given the fact that Massachusetts, compared to other states, is not going to have a ton of money for infrastructure grants, it's very smart to be looking at public-private partnerships, which I know this group has been very interested in looking at, and to consider other funding mechanisms, financing mechanisms. And so, a few things I wanted to share. So, as an example of the kind of information that you can find at our website or through our group and various other things that we offer, is sort of a tale of two cities. So I would suggest that this group look at, for example, FAR Texas, PHARR. I'll give you the short oversimplified version. So FAR Texas is 80,000 population, considered the worst connected city in America, or just about the worst connected, 23,000 square miles. Last year, they started building a fiber to the home network, and they are basically done. They've built out, we're talking, how many miles here? Something on the order of 398 miles of fiber deployed, passing 24,000 residential and business addresses in that city. They finance it with revenue bonds. The construction is about 59 million. They took 12 million of their rescue plan funds, and they financed the rest of it with 47 million worth of revenue bonds, which did not raise taxes. Now, this is a city that's served by AT&T Spectrum and T-Mobile Internet. Still, the connectivity rates in FAR have been horrible. The project, sort of the background, is that they sort of envisioned this project as one of the centerpieces of their city strategic document, which you may find instructive. I've got links to things that I can put in the chat and share or send afterwards on anything that I'm talking about here, for folks who want to follow up. In fact, I met the project manager, Guillermo, when I was in San Antonio for Net Inclusion about a month ago. Broadband infrastructure was really a key part of their strategic vision. And they had really ambitious goals. I mean, their strategic document explicitly says that they were looking to promote broadband connections by having 65% of eligible households connected to the city's service, which they call FARNet. They have a water and wastewater utility, but not a municipal electric utility. As many of you probably know, most municipal networks are in cities that have municipal electric, have an existing municipal electric utility. That's not the case in FAR, and the other community I'll mention, that's also not the case. And what they did is they really reframed broadband not as a problem, but as part of a solution for a variety of social needs: healthcare, education, economic development. The Mayor Hernandez out there, a quote that I put in my notes here is that he said the city of FAR made it a priority to bridge the digital divide before it was even the talk of the town. They work with multiple partners: contractors, consultants, engineers, fiber distributors, network and equipment and software providers, including CTC. So Joanne is familiar. They work with the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. They work with the school district. And I know in January they were 72% complete with the network, which they started off with a pilot project to sort of and looked at that carefully to sort of demonstrate the demand and the need for this network. And right now they're offering symmetrical 500 megabit connectivity for $25 a month and a symmetrical gig for $50 a month. For small businesses, you get the symmetrical 500 megabits per second connectivity for $100 a month. they put together a really, they put together a couple of cool videos. I'll drop a link in the chat here of one of them. I think these videos are often very, where's the, oh, I don't know that I can drop it in the chat. So I don't see an option for.
You can drop it in the Q&A, Sean, and
Okay.
I've been dropping a couple of links in there for you as well that you might see.
Okay. Okay, I will put these links in here when we're finished here. The other community, a tale of two cities. The other city is Sandy, Oregon, who built out a fiber to the home network. Probably about 10 years ago. Sandy Net, Sandy, Oregon's a population of about 10,000. We did a case study, a pretty in-depth case study called Sandy Net Goes Gig, a model for Anytown, USA, that I think is really worth a read. I've dropped the link for the PDF so you guys could check that out. They started providing DSL to residents and businesses back when they first got into broadband, and then converted over to fiber over the intervening years. They had a great idea back in 2010, actually. So when Google announced that it was doing the Google Fiber contest, city officials held a "Why Wait for Google" contest, inviting residents to demonstrate a demand for fiber to the home. So after comparing the cost of a pilot project with the level of demand, the city decided to pursue a full citywide build out. So they issued revenue bonds for $7.5 million in February of 2014 to cover the construction costs. So another network, well, this network they built without any grant funds. And today, get this, their take rate is 74%. And they're offering 500 megabit symmetrical connectivity for $45 a month and a gig for $60 a month. They have a great video as well about Sandy Net that I'll share. I want to briefly mention Fairlawn Gig in Fairlawn, Ohio. I love Fairlawn Gig. We're close to Ernie Staten and the folks over there in Fairlawn. I wanted to focus more on FAR and Sandy, Oregon, because I think they're probably a little bit more instructive, although because Fairlawn's a bit of an outlier. I mean, it's a pretty wealthy part of the Akron area. They're growing economically more than other like business parks. And so I don't know that they would necessarily be considered sort of a normal city in that sense, but they finance their network. Fairlawn has about 7,500 residents. They financed it with municipal bonds, no grants. And since they built the network, there's been an 8.7% increase in local home values, which I think is a good reminder that about the community benefits of a ubiquitous fiber network that goes far beyond the balance sheet, and sort of the multiplier effects, that these networks have on communities that are not as easy to quantify by kind of looking at it with the green eye shades in terms of CapEx and OpEx, and although those things are truly important, they have a really great video with the mayor there, and they tell the story of how for years they begged the big incumbents to build out a network because they were having businesses come to city leaders saying, listen, the internet here sucks and we're going to have to move, and we may even move out of the state. So they started off, I think, looking to do a public-private partnership. And when that didn't really draw the kind of the kind of proposals that they were looking for, they said, you know what, we're going to have to build it ourselves. And they did. And they do not have an existing municipal electric utility. I think there'd be another great community to probably speak to, particularly, as it relates to the bond market. But the video that they built is terrific.
John, can I just ask
yes.
you on the, I know you mentioned one of the other communities is about 10 years as they've been.
I think that's Sandy Net in Sandy, Oregon.
Yes. How about Fairlawn? Because you mentioned about the home values. So
Fairlawn's network is fairly new. I think they're probably about 3 or 4 years built out. They have a terrific take rate. I think it's about 65% or more take rate in Fairlawn.
Okay.
And they're competing with the big guys there.
Yeah. And the reason why not to downplay too much the fact that the home values went up, when they built this, but in general, we've seen home values go up in many areas. So you know, to know.
Right. There's not a one-to-one correlation for sure, but I think anecdotally, you know, this is something that we see across the country. Like, for example, I've written some stories about the Berkshires, for example, and the fiber to the home network boom out there, and particularly during the pandemic. And one of those towns, I think it was Beckett, or one of those towns where there were sort of a number of anecdotes about how homes that had been on the market for a few years, once they built the fiber network, the properties were being snapped up like hotcakes. Now, a lot of that had to do with the pandemic, because, of course, as people were kind of fleeing cities and wanting to go to like open areas or more spread out areas, the number one question they had, though, was, yes, but what about the connectivity? It's great to, you know, have that space and that small town life and everything like that, but in order for me to operate in the modern economy, I can't be dealing with DSL or ridiculously expensive, you know, cable provider who, you know, where there's an outage every other day and what have you.
Yep. Yeah, good point.
Let me, I'd like to also point out that something else that's probably worth looking at, and we've, all of these things I'm speaking of, we've written quite a bit about, but this in particular, the communication union district model in Vermont, we've written about. We're working on an in-depth report. We've written a ton of stuff. I've written a number of things. So communication union districts are similar, like I guess in Massachusetts with like water districts or fire districts. So it's basically, so EC Fiber was the first communication union district in Vermont, and it was so successful it convinced the state lawmakers that this is going to be our model of how we're going to deliver universal fiber access across the entire state of Vermont. We're going to use the community broadband approach. They enabled the formation of communication union districts, which allows 2 or more towns to join together to form a telecommunications utility. I think there's about a dozen CUDs in existence right now, which encompasses pretty much the entire state, except for some of the, you know, dense, you know, more dense urban areas. Obviously Vermont's a lot more rural than a number of the communities here that are on the call, but I still think it's kind of worth looking at the CUD model. Just recently, the Vermont Community Broadband Board, the VCCB, approved $9.1 million in grant funding for a public-private partnership between Wastefield and Champaign Valley Telecom and Maple Broadband, which is one of the CUDs that is composed of 20 member towns in Addison County, Vermont. So I've got some links and some stuff to share there. It might also be worth looking at LeverettNet, which is in Leverett, Massachusetts. I think they were the first fiber to the home network out there in the Berkshires. Leverett's like between Amherst and Shutesbury. Got a 3-member board of selectmen, I think about 43 miles of roads. About half of the town is classified as forest or agricultural or recreational land. So they built out a fiber to the home network. It's worked really well for them. And that network is technically a public-private partnership. And I bring that up because I wanted to segue quickly, because I know that public-private partnerships is something of vast interest to this group. And I wanted to share a few resources that we have on that front, because there are public-private partnerships and then there are public-private partnerships in name only. Leverett is highlighted in a in-depth report that we did on public-private partnerships, a report called Successful Strategies for Broadband Public-Private Partnerships, that highlights how P3 networks are increasingly viable, but not panaceas, and how, you know, with any public-private partnership, there are risks, which is why communities should be very careful in picking a partner and being leery of any potential partner that claims that there's no risk with their preferred approach. The report also breaks down the variety of models that are out there and looks at 3 and does 3 case studies in particular that I think are particularly instructive. But in that report, it mentions LeverettNet, which is the kind of public-private partnership that we think often works better for communities, one in which the community itself retains ownership of the network itself. And then they contract with a private provider to provide retail service, et cetera. You know, there's a lot of flavors of public-private partnerships, and there's a lot of things to look for in terms of weighing risks and benefits and how you get to something that's a real partnership and not simply sort of a way for a private company to get a town to pony up the money and then for the ISP to reap all the rewards.
Can you distribute that to us if you don't mind? That'd be great.
Yes,
looking at that.
Yes, I will. Yes, I
Thank
will.
you.
And I'm just about done. I'll drop all of these links.
you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Sean, just so you know, I mean, in the Q&A, I know a lot of these case studies you're referencing, and especially from your site, so I've been dropping them into the Q&A.
Yeah,
As
I'm
Yes,
not seeing
I think-
anything.
I don't see the Q&A.
Yeah, I see the
It's,
Q&A, but I don't see anything in it.
you look at the bottom of the page, I've opened it, it's got six entries
Is
there.
it, is it a document?
No, if
it's
you
a
go to the
sidecar.
bottom of the Zoom call where you see share screen and, participants.
Yeah, I don't get any of that. The only options I'm getting are blur my background, choose my, yeah.
Maybe you gotta go to the full screen view or whatever, but what I've been doing, thank you, Sean, for putting them in there. I've been actually copy and pasting them into a Word document. So at the end of this, whatever goes in the chat, I'll copy and paste into an email and send them back out to people. And then if we miss anything, Sean Gonzalez, if you send it, I'll add your links.
Yeah, exactly. Because I have quite a few links. Like everything that I've mentioned here, I have links to. So for folks to kind of dive in and kind of look around. So last couple of things I want to mention. So another report that's worth looking at was one done by the Coalition for Local Internet Choice, which we're part of in the Benton Foundation, a close ally of ours. That report's called The Emerging World of Broadband Public-Private Partnerships, a business strategy and legal guide that I think this group should check out. I'll mention that yesterday I had the pleasure of talking with Ken Bell and Mike Worthington at the Taunton MLP. I'll be writing a story that I'll probably publish tomorrow on what's going on in Taunton there. So just so you're aware, I know that they're a part of this group. I think, Taunton's a little bit unique compared to many communities probably in this coalition, as they have an existing utility, but they're in the process of building a fiber network with a sort of a fiber hood approach. I should mention that there is a group that we are very involved with called the American Association of Public Broadband that was formed about a year ago. I think it might be worth this group thinking about maybe becoming a member, or certainly certain towns maybe becoming a member. One thing like with community broadband, unlike environment or other issues, like there's no like Sierra Club for like municipal broadband. So the AAPB is sort of trying to step into that breach. I mean, we'll never outlobby, AT&T, but it's a great group. And I mention them in particular because Kim McKinley, who's a regular guest on our Connect This show, a great friend of ours, she's also the director of marketing and communications for Utopia Fiber, which is the biggest open access network in the country. They're doing some great stuff. She might be a great resource because it's worth knowing their history, like the real challenges and near failure they had kind of coming out of the gate. Utopia Fiber is essentially a middle mile network that was formed by a number of Utah communities. Now they're operating in like 19 different states. They just recently helped finance and build a citywide fiber to the home network in Bozeman, Montana. They're doing great work. And so they know all about, sort of financing this stuff. And then lastly, I want to mention that we ourselves at ILSR have two programs that we've rolled out about a year ago. One's called the Let's Get Going program, the Let's Get Going broadband program, and the other one is what we call the Urban Digital Bootcamp. The Let's Get Going broadband program is really like designed for a cohort. It's an online program. It's 8-week. It's 2-hour workshops once a week for 8 weeks that can be customized. We've been doing this with different groups across the country. And really it's designed to demystify the options that are out there. Like we don't get on there and try to sell people stuff. It's really about getting mostly town officials and community stakeholders super familiar and deep dive into the technologies that are out there, like how fiber technology works. What about wireless? What are some of the operational challenges? What are the financing challenges and considerations? Public-private partnerships, all of the above. Evaluating consultants and so on and so forth. So that's something that we've been offering cohorts. I think it's about if this group or a cluster of folks were interested, I can put you in contact with our outreach coordinator and Kimberly Deanne. They both run sort of that program. It's basically about 10 or 15,000 per town. It's a very in-depth training workshop. And then we've also been doing these digital urban digital boot camps. So about 2 years ago, we started doing tribal broadband boot camps with tribal communities across the country. And this is super intense. It's in person. We bring in lots of folks, through relationships of people that are operating networks, and we cover, everything under the sun as it relates to building, operating, and maintaining networks, including, I learned how to splice fiber at one of these boot camps. So we've been putting on these urban digital boot camps. Chris and I did the first one in Los Angeles with the Street Lighting Bureau out there a few months back. We've done one in San Antonio, and then I'll be heading to Detroit with Chris on Monday. I think on Monday we're doing one out in Detroit with others to follow. So that's another thing that we offer that I think can be very useful, particularly to a group like that. So with that, I think I'll stop there. The links I will put in once I figure out how to put it in that Q&A, but certainly would encourage you to peruse our website and to use us as you see fit. I hope you were all able to get a chance to read the story that I wrote about this coalition. We're huge fans of what each of you are trying to do. We're big advocates in the space for what you are trying to do, and we try to avail ourselves as best we can. I should have also mentioned that, and I'm here with my ILSR CBN hat on, but my side hobby, so to speak, I guess you could say, is I'm also an active board member with Open Cape, which is the middle mile network in the southeastern part of and I'm also an advisory board member with FoundNet.
All right, thank you.
I know Art very well, and I know that this group knows Art as well.
Yeah, so thank you, Sean. And before we go on to our next agenda item, just want to stop here and see if anyone has any questions for Sean.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Courtney.
So, hi, Sean. You've been a great asset for us here in Falmouth. So I'm intrigued by something you said. We're looking very strongly at the possibility of a public-private partnership, given the reality of the financing mindset in the town of Falmouth. That $50 million or $80 million is going to be a big nut. So I was intrigued by your concept that the best contractual arrangement for a partnership is that the town owns a network and the private partner operates it, or however the scenario is, which seems very simple. But if you have a potential partner who comes in and says, well, we'll put up 50 to 70% of the funding, aren't they going to, is that something they would readily agree to? I mean, what's your experience on that?
So that's a great question, and I think it's one worth diving into a bit more. I won't pretend to be an expert on sort of the legalities around public-private partnerships. Certainly, I think it's probably ideal if to sort of get a good is to wrestle with that question and get a good grasp on who owns the network, at least up to. And there's a variety. I mean, there's certain does the public entity own to the demarcation line? I mean, certainly the internet service provider is going to own the equipment in terms of the ONTs and the drops and all of the the routers and so on and so forth. But I think the best kind of public partnerships are one in which municipalities retain majority ownership or ownership of the network itself. It's not to say that other partnerships can't work, but certainly I think it probably best positions the city moving forward should the internet service provider sort of fall out of favor, or in a lot of business in our business environment today. And I think you see this happen where companies get sold and things can change quite a bit. So I'm happy to, follow up with you and, we can get, Chris involved. I think a big part of it, has to really just do with the economics and making sure that each party has skin in the game. But I think those two reports and some of the report that we did, I think will give some keen insight onto some of those questions that you're raising.
I was just going to quickly interject and say, from the city of New Bedford's perspective, we've been approached by now 3 entities that have proposed to us public-private partnerships. And basically what they've told us is the equity percentage is commensurate with the level of investment. So, if it's 40 million and we put 20 in and they put 20 in, it's 50-50. But Sean, to exactly your point, we've said that we will not be willing to engage in any type of partnership unless we have majority ownership of the network. That's just a showstopper for us at this point.
So
Yeah,
I could add in that one of the things that we've learned in Fairhaven is, this is a factor, and we're really, and we had a meeting yesterday, by the way, it was a small subgroup, subset of this group. We had people, representatives from New Bedford. Sean was there, Peter Chase from Dartmouth, Keith and David from Westport, and myself from Fairhaven. And we had someone who missed the call with from Mattapoisett that was planning to attend. So that group is just really just scratching. Oh, a little background noise here, scratching the surface. But one of the things that it appears to me is, in addition to what Sean mentioned, that investors going to be in this for a reason. They're not here to just donate their money. If they're putting in a high percentage of the capital, they're going to want something in return for that. But there could be a timing element where the ownership might not be there in year 1, but it might be there in year 10, 15, 20, whatever parameters you set around it. So
That's right.
Eventually you may be able to, the city town, or the group that works together may be able to buy out the ownership stake, and that may work for a community that's not able to come up with, this is very expensive funding. So I think it's going to depend on, when communities decide to work together towards this, that's where the complexity comes in, because maybe not every community is going to have the same vision, the same goals, the same appetite for risk or, reward. And so there's a lot to think about there. But I know in Fairhaven, a public-private partnership would not be a possibility for us because the economies of scale are not there. At our population level, we're being told that, you need to be at least like 30,000 to even really get the interest of an equity partner. So that's why we're looking at this with other groups. So I see Sean Gross with his hand up. Go ahead, Sean. You're muted. I don't know if you're trying to.
Sorry, I just took myself off mute. I said one very short, important question. Was your email address included in the invite to all of us? And if not, I know you can't get access to the Q&A, so getting your email address would be fantastic, because I think you're an amazing resource that we all should be, looking to tap into. So yeah, I would love to,
I have his email address. And so we have a members email list that we're using to send out for meeting invites. And I guess from your perspective, you probably don't see the individual email addresses, but I have Sean's and also his the link to his organization's website was in the prior invite, I think, but we can recirculate that again.
Right. And and after this, I'll have to figure out how to put these links in, because I don't see the Q&A either at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, or you can just email them. You can just email them to me, Sean.
Okay, I will certainly do that. And I should just so with the Let's Get Going broadband program, or the boot camp, but with the Let's Get Going broadband program, when I mentioned that 40,000, that's for the entire cohort. We're talking more like in the neighborhood of about 10,000 per town, just in terms of a ballpark price. There's that's sort of negotiable, I think, but I don't handle that aspect of it. So I can put you in touch with the folks who do. if that's something that's of interest to folks here. But certainly, Sean, I would love to, to follow up with you. And that's what we're here for. I mean, that's our mission, to not just write about this stuff and talk about this stuff, but really try to help communities move forward in ways that work for communities without, saying what people should or shouldn't be doing. Those are decisions that communities have to be making. But I think we can at least offer a number of resources and perspective and a network of folks that are in this space and have been in the space, where you can build on some of the mistakes that have been made in the past and not reinvent the wheel, as it were, or avoid certain pitfalls.
I think I just found your email address. It's just Ask Gonzalez at
Yes.
ILSR. Yeah.
.org. That's me.
I got it.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
So Sean, Sean Gonzalez, are you planning on staying on the call, or are you gonna drop off as soon as we finish?
I actually need to drop shortly because I need to do some writing.
Okay, no worries. I just wanted to make sure.
It looks like Courtney's got his hand up too.
Yeah, one quick question, Sean, and following up. I think that the issue really is in one of these partnerships is, I guess, for the partner, the exit strategy. One of the people that we talked to was brought their venture capitalist to a meeting. So that tells you they want to put the money in, make some money, and exit. So there's oftentimes a potential for then that ISP to either get bought out or move on. And that's where the pitfalls of these partnerships come into play.
Yeah. There's a really good example of that, I think, is I'm pretty sure it's Lakeland, Florida, where they entered into a public-private partnership that went way left, and it's terrible. So that's one of the things too that we pride ourselves on too, is, I mean, a community network that doesn't work, it doesn't benefit anybody. So we tend to try to be as blunt and as honest as we know how, in terms of laying these things out and not just saying, hey, just go for it. This stuff can be complex and it needs to be taken super seriously, just as any infrastructure project in any community. But I think you've got your finger on the pulse in terms of what are some of the important questions that need to really be weighed as it relates to public-private partnerships. Westminster, Maryland, also, they partnered with Ting. It's an open access network, but they gave Ting like exclusive rights for I think the first 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. Ting, Elliot that owns it is a friend of ours. I think they may have sold it though. But Westminster, Maryland is also another community that built the network, but they own the infrastructure, and partnered with Ting. I'm not sure what that financial arrangement looks like. But again, there are examples of public-private partnerships in which communities retain the ownership of the network. What the details of that arrangement or what the incentives were, that it varies community to community.
Yeah, I know that at least one of the entities that deals in public-private partnerships has mentioned to us that it is possible to put into the stipulation into the agreement that will not allow it to be sold, like you mentioned. So that's, that is likely people learning from bad experiences and acknowledging that there's something there that needs to be addressed.
Right.
Yeah. So
certainly if community, you're in a much better situation if you're able to fund the construction yourself, or mostly yourself, with some investment from an internet service provider. That's obviously going to give you far greater leverage on questions around that. And I think that's I think Bob, when we were talking about your experience in Fairhaven, when you guys put out the RFP and your lawyer said don't hold your breath. If you don't have the infrastructure, nobody's going to come in and compete with Comcast.
Right. Yeah. And I think, just looking at the time, we have, like I mentioned, Cheryl Koss from MBI was supposed to be joining us around 5:30. So I want to just be mindful that if we jump off into, and that was the second item on our agenda, but I'd like to go to the third item and talk a little bit about municipal light plant formation. And I had an interesting conversation with Courtney this morning. He called me and we talked a little bit about that. And I'd like to jump into that, but then recognize that we might have to put that on pause, the conversation, and let Cheryl speak to us and then come back to it. But one of the things, you know, in Fairhaven, we did go
Bob,
through.
before Sean jumps off, can
Go
I
ahead.
ask one question?
Oh, sure.
Which is, do you have compiled any benchmarks on what the build out costs?
You know, it's interesting. So you mean like I think Chris might have his fingers on some of that. We don't have a document that you mean like a cost per mile or per foot, like on fiber build outs?
Yeah, and costs per, you know, lateral connection to a home that you pass.
No, I don't believe that we have that. I know Chris has some data pertaining to that, but again, you know, that varies from community to community. So like, for example,
Yeah.
on the Cape, I think they, you know, it's the back of the envelope calculation is like 2,500 per home. I'm not sure what the cost per mile is or cost per foot.
Yeah, we had the cost per passing in Falmouth is somewhere around $2,300 to $2,500.
Right.
Which is a little high, but that's a function of the geography. You know, if you have a dense population, the cost can be a lot less. But
And
Falmouth
was
has-
that
Falmouth
aerial
has
or
480 miles of road and a whole mass of square miles that I can't remember how many there are.
Yeah, you're raising some good questions, and that's stuff that we go into in depth in the Let's Get Going cohorts with the, you know, aerial versus fiber and kind of like the, you know, sort of how you try to weigh that out. There's, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, burying the fiber is, you know, is more expensive, but it's probably a better outcome in terms of reliability and how long the network lasts versus aerial. It's subject to less things happening to it, I think, but certainly more expensive. And then you've got the issue of, you know, digging up roads, which is no small issue.
So if any of you are interested, our feasibility for Falmouth Net, feasibility study and our high level engineering design study are both on our website, which is falmouthnet, all one word, .org. Both of those are there, and they have information like this on cost per passing and these kinds of things. So
It's an excellent feasibility study, very thorough.
Yeah.
It's terrific.
it's a 200
Right.
page feasibility study, but there's a 35-page summary that gives you most of the information.
Yeah, and so what I wanted to highlight for the group is that, you know, again, in Fairhaven, we went through the 2 town meeting votes to establish that we could form a municipal light plant in Fairhaven. We haven't taken the step of forming a municipal light board because we wanted to kind of study this public-private partnership and see if, you know, that made more sense for us, if we still needed the municipal light board in that case. And we also wanted to make sure that we fully understood another option to use an enterprise fund for this kind of thing. So, but one thing that Courtney pointed out this morning is that there is in Mass General Law that governs municipal lights, they encourage the coordination of municipal lights among each other. So if there were
Yes.
multiple municipal lights, say in various communities in Massachusetts, and we formed some kind of a you know, I'm not sure it would be a network, a working group, or what it would be defined as, but there are advantages to sharing costs in that way. But is that anything you have knowledge about, Sean, you want to share?
I don't. And I do know that MLPs, you know, establishing an MLP certainly puts you in a better position, I think, to partner with other communities for sure. And it was one of the reasons why I brought up the communication union districts. It's not, you know, it's not the same exact model, but I think it's similar concept of multiple municipalities joining together in a joint effort.
Yeah, and so my impression was that if you formed a good public-private partnership, then you wouldn't need to have established municipal light boards. It would be right. It would be done. It's a different model. So
It is a different model.
Yeah, okay. So
If I could
does it-
interrupt, if I could jump in there, Bob, and our vision, I think, is that even if we have a public-private partnership, and that's where the model goes for Falmouth, the municipal light board becomes the town's end of the administrator of the contract.
Yes.
I think that's a valid exercise, because those folks theoretically are gonna be the ones that are most engaged. And
Yeah. right, it's a good
that would
point.
be my advice to you.
Yeah, exactly. And, so it's, our hesitation in Fairhaven forming one is we didn't know what the charter was going to be. We don't, what's their function until we kind of figure out where we're headed. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg. We're trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. But I see your point that if we get to a certain point down the road where it may just make sense to form the municipal light board and then have that group facilitate these kind of discussions. But that comes with, certain criteria, and some communities, it would be an elected position. And that's what Falmouth is doing right now. They're going through an election process to elect the board. So it's, but, and I could share a document on that as well, that if anybody's interested on the options for how that you can form a municipal light board, what ways you can go about that. So anybody else have any other comments or questions about municipal light boards or functionality or anything like that?
The only thing I would add is that our election is on the 18th of May. So, we have 5 candidates running for 5 positions. So I think it's
Who's going to be on it, huh?
Sam Patterson, who's in on this meeting, is one of the candidates. And I've asked the other ones to be a part of these meetings going forward. So, but anyway, yeah, we're going to be, frankly, in the same boat. We're going to be feeling our way. We're got to figure out what we're doing. We don't have to, we're not required to have a charter or anything else, because Mass General Law provides the framework. So basically, we have to just operate with the open meeting law and with public records and duly notice the meetings, and follow Robert's Rules of Order in terms of the conduct of the meeting. And then we can make other rules as we go, but we don't have to write a charter to start with.
Yeah, when I mentioned the word charter, I kind of meant more of like a mission statement, because in other words, I felt like if we formed a municipal light plant, we would have to say, what it is we want them to do. And if we don't know what we want them to do yet, it's, it'd be a group without a mission. So that's more of what I was referring to. But
yeah, we'll be confronting the same thing.
Right. Yep. That vision is super important. And sometimes communities undervalue the importance of public education and marketing and so forth. I think it's a big part of the work, because the fact of the matter is that that there's a lot of, ultimately this comes down to, it's not a question of can communities afford it. I mean, communities take on infrastructure projects that are far more expensive than building fiber networks. I mean, that you talk about the cost per mile of deploying fiber. What's the cost per mile of building a bike path? I promise you, or water lines. I promise you, it's orders of magnitude greater. Or Falmouth High School was at $100 million they spent on building the high school. But still, and then there's the secret sort of pro Comcast, like there's this Alliance for Quality Broadband that's been rearing its head across the country, and anywhere municipal proposals that come up, they really launch these aggressive campaigns to convince people that municipal broadband's a failure. In fact, this is wild. They use Fairlawn Gig as an example of a failure. Now, Fairlawn Gig, just about 6 months ago, just recently upped their speeds and slashed their prices. You get a gig, symmetrical gig for $55 a month, a 2.5 gig package for $75 a month, and a 5 gig package that the gamers love for $99 a month. It's like, if that's an example of a failure, I wish my provider failed like that, which is Comcast, by the way.
So, the one other thing that Courtney mentioned earlier today, that there's a coalition formed down the Cape that's doing similar work to what we're doing. And I thought it might be helpful if you could elaborate on that for the rest of the group here, Courtney, because maybe there's a reason we want to, connect with them, and they might be interested in working with us.
Yeah, this group is run through the Cape Cod Technology Council, and the fellow who's leading it is Gene Curry, who's a lawyer, and you probably know him, don't you, Sean?
I
Gene-
don't actually.
Yeah, but anyway, it's the Cape Cod Technology Council, and we have held almost identical discussions as you guys are holding. Your discussions are kind of statewide, but ours are focused on the Cape. And yet, in many respects, particularly for towns in southeastern Massachusetts, which are also served by Open Cape, it would really make sense for the two groups to coordinate. I'll reach out.
For sure.
I'll reach out to Gene Curry and see what he thinks and make him aware of this, and we'll figure
Yeah.
it out.
I mentioned it to the folks over at Open Cape, and I know that Jen from Open Cape, I think, was going to email you, Bob, because I think that they were
Yes.
interested in participating in some fashion.
Right, she did email me yesterday, and I haven't had the chance to connect with her since then, but right, so yeah, that's interesting to learn, and we can definitely see if there's an opportunity to join forces there, at least in some parts. I don't see Cheryl on the call yet, so I'm going to just keep going down the list here. It's number 4 is the public-private partnership. So we've talked a little bit about that. And I just wanted to bring the rest of the group up to date in case anyone has any questions on that. But with the local group that I mentioned earlier on the call that got together in New Bedford, Dartmouth, Westport, and Fairhaven, we have agreed that we're going to be trying to set more regular meeting schedules. We talked about the possibility of putting together a request for proposals or request for information at some point in time to figure out, who an appropriate partner might be. But before we get to that point, we really need to kind of, have a little more time to figure out, what's most important for each community. What we're interested in, like Sean mentioned, from New Bedford might be, Sean Gross, I should say, is, they're going to have priorities on digital equity, aspects, and other communities may or may not have that same interest. Some communities, as Westport mentioned, that they have already an established municipal fiber loop that they're looking to leverage in some way, and the town of Fairhaven has that as well. So it's somewhere along the line, there's existing assets that might be leveraged. There are different maybe competing interests that somehow have to be settled and sorted and come to a common agreement. But Falmouth has already spoken to a number of different entities that do the financing, and I think our group is going to be looking to try and gather information and understand what the different models are and what ways we can safeguard ourselves from avoid the pitfalls that were mentioned before about things taking a left-hand turn, et cetera. So we got a lot of work to do. We're really just starting out, but just wanted to kind of bring the group up to speed and see if anyone had any questions for us. Procurement was another thing that we talked about, was making sure that we follow procurement rules for municipalities when we're going about this, the bidding process and everything. And Peter Chase from Dartmouth mentioned that the state has addition to our own, we might have procurement officers in each of our communities, but the state also has resources available to guide us in that way. So
Yep.
complex issues to try to sort
Yeah.
out, you know.
Yeah,
but-
and again, another shameless plug. Like all of these things that is specifically what the Let's Get Going broadband program is for. It's to really delve into all of these things, from procurement to all of these type of questions and considerations, or at least things that folks need to be considering as you enter into this process. The other thing I just would mention, and it's not in particular to public-private partnerships, and this is probably more relevant for places like New Bedford or some of the gateway cities or larger towns, but there are some Easter eggs in the BEAD funding for hooking up MDUs, low income housing as well. And so although Massachusetts might not be getting a bucket load of money compared to like California or Texas, who are getting, several billion or probably, the way the language is crafted in the BEAD rules, I think I'm pretty sure that low income MDUs can be kind of treated like unserved areas.
That's exactly right, Sean. And that's exactly what we've been talking to Josh at MBI about.
Yes,
We
that's
already
smart.
We already conducted our own speed test in partnership with the school district. So we've got a very good handle on what the average up and download speeds look like. And Josh wants just a second layer of validation on those MDUs. So we're going through a second round of speed test. But yeah, it looks like that they want to target at least upgrades to the infrastructure inside of those facilities. So yeah, you hit the nail right on the head there.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's a way to sort of get at it and drive fiber out into the community, which puts communities in better place down the road. But I think MDUs, there really is some good things that can be done around that with the BEAD funds, and you don't, of course, with MDUs, you don't need as much, and it's a great demonstration case.
For sure.
Yeah. So yeah, that again, looking at like the leverage points that different communities might have. Obviously, if New Bedford is able to leverage that kind of resource, from the federal level to get funding in that helps build a major portion of the network in that community. Of course, the population's much larger in New Bedford, but that it's figuring out those things, like that's a real value, obviously, and to a certain percentage of the network. So what we talked about conceptually the other day is that maybe, say this group works together to decide who's going to be the equity partner in whatever form that takes, that there may need to be like a master agreement that all the communities agree in some way to work together. And then there might need to be agreements between each community and the developer separately of some, to some degree. But it's that's where it gets really complicated, and none of us have been through this before, and I don't know if there's the information you're talking about, Sean Gonzalez, is going to help us through those kind of things.
I don't know exactly. Yeah,
it feels to me like those are more specific things that we're going to have to just kind of hammer out around a table and just discuss what's important, and then have a partner that will explain to us whether they can or can't accommodate that amount of flexibility among the participants. So,
well, Sean, I know that you want to jump here, and we don't have our speaker yet here for.
I'm going to stay until 6, actually.
Okay, so
yeah.
One question to you, since Bob just brought it up, since we've been talking about this idea of regional consortiums, and a regional consortium that would be focusing upon fiber to the home, so last mile type solutions here. Have you seen any examples where multiple municipalities come together to build out something along these lines?
Well, yeah, in Vermont, but again, it's I don't every place is a little bit different, but that was why I mentioned the CUDs in Vermont. I think New Hampshire is doing it a bit. And there's some interesting coalition building and work going on out in actually in Texas right now and in LA County in particular that we've been involved in, Digital Equity LA. And they've been very successful in advancing, in working with county and city officials to move forward with a pilot project to some of the least connected parts of Los Angeles. And they're also dealing quite a bit with the terrible maps that the CPUC put out, their priority area maps that somehow had like Oprah Winfrey's neighborhood as a priority area, and like places in like the worst parts of LA were not even on the map. It was nuts. But anyhow.
Brentwood.
The other question, since you're on here still, is, and I know you mentioned the national broadband map, very quickly in the early part of your discussion, but do you really see any type of path forward with respect to challenges to the FCC regarding, the major discrepancies, regarding?
Right. So supposedly they're going to be updating the map and it should theoretically get better, but
yeah, right.
our folks have lost all faith in the FCC's ability to do their basic job, which is to tell us precisely where broadband is or is not available. I don't have any faith that they'll be able to do that. And so one question that I have is, so the FCC maps are important as it pertains to the BEAD allocations, but once the BEAD money has been allocated, I don't know that there's anything that compels a state. Like states can do their own mapping.
Right.
And so I don't know that there's anything necessarily that compels a state to necessarily hand out grants on the basis of the FCC maps alone. I'm not clear on that, but I wonder that's a question that I've been asking folks that follow this closely, and they're not clear on it either.
Yeah,
I'm not even sure the NTIA is clear on it, to be frank.
There isn't a clear answer, and I think that's one of the reasons why Josh is really interested in doing some type of statewide mapping from MBI, versus reliance on the national broadband map. But
right, and I think one thing that's actually going to be worth keeping an eye. So one of the things as it relates to like the state grant, so is the challenge process within states, and so the big companies love to abuse that process by filing fraudulent claims or making claims, and then hope that and it works in many instances, and they hope people walk away because they don't have the stomach or the resources to drag the fight on. And so like Minnesota, for example, and Colorado at least have stuff on the books that kind of punish ISPs for challenging grants that stop projects, on sort of the, right of first refusal. I think it was what they call it in Colorado. But in Colorado, in the law, if an ISP's incumbents have the right of first refusal, but they have to meet the specifications that were in the grant that they're challenging. And then in Minnesota, I think if you file a fraudulent claim, you then forego your ability to get any grant money for like the next 2 funding cycles or something like that. And I only bring that up because there's a number of states. I mean, broadband offices are overwhelmed. They're not very staffed. Not all of them are staffed very well, and these are kind of things like in Louisiana that caught them off guard. Like there was a project that Connexon was going to build in East Carroll Parish in Louisiana, one of the worst connected parts of the state. They won the grant, great fanfare. The governor came down and did the whole announcement and everything, and then Cable One ended up challenging it, and the state ended up rejecting the challenge, but I think now it's in the courts. And meanwhile, the folks in that parish are, they have a proposal, they have the grant funding on the table to bring fiber to the home service, but it's all being held up because, the incumbents, the big national providers. And we actually were accidentally CC'd on an email that Cable One sent out to their little network saying, and in it, they made the mistake of saying our number one goal is to prevent municipalities from getting any grant money in the states that we operate in.
That's really interesting regarding the Colorado and I think you said Minnesota cases, but did that require the state legislature to?
Yeah, I believe so. And so it makes me wonder, like, because I don't have a clear sense of, even in Massachusetts, like how that process works, the challenge process, because I'm just thinking down the road that, like, you know, not so, okay, take the less than 25.3 off the table, because in Massachusetts that barely exists. And so it's this underserved area, my guess is that if it's important enough to Comcast, they'll challenge those areas and say, we already serve those areas. And then that's when you get into these arguments about overbuilding. I hate that term, by the way, but that's when it'll come up.
Hey,
Yep.
Sean. I'm
He's
sorry.
here.
I didn't mean to interrupt. Let me know when I can.
Go ahead. Tom.
Jump right in. I see NBI
So-
jumping.
So as I was reading the article that you wrote about our coalition, and thank you very much. I think it was in your publication where I stumbled upon something that sort of made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. So I'm an old cable TV guy, worked cable for over 20 years. And years ago, when NECTA, the New England Cable and Television Association, was formed, there was not much to worry about because there was no other competition. Internet wasn't even heard of then. But I stumbled, I think, through your publication that they've rebranded themselves now to be called the New England Connectivity and Telecommunications Association. So what is it? Beware of the wolf in sheep's clothing. When you said, you know, they may stand up to fight it. I'm just wondering why. Well, I know why they're obviously rebranding and trying to sort of reinvent themselves again, but I'm petrified of them becoming involved and ingrained in anything that we're doing as municipalities. For that very reason. I mean, they could easily...
I think your concern is well founded, and you know, particularly, you know, I mean, I'm sure that, you know, the big guys are not really concerned about, you know, small, like these small communities out in the Berkshires. You know, it's like you can have those, but when you're talking about New Bedford or Taunton or Boston, God forbid, or something, or Somerville or Cambridge just finished their feasibility study. Somerville, I'm supposed to be testifying to one of their committees coming up. I think in areas like that, you'll see that kind of campaign being launched for sure. You know, letters to the editor. They've got really sleek websites, and you know, they call them government-owned networks, and they use all of that language to scare people away from, you know. Yeah.
So thanks for that question, Tom. And I just noticed Cheryl came on board, and it's I'm going to need to apologize because I checked my email to see if she had sent me anything, and her question was, how do I get into the Zoom meeting? What's the Zoom link? So it was my fault there that she wasn't on with us earlier, but she is here. And Cheryl, if you'd thank you for coming on to talk to us about the NTIA comment period. And I see your cute little smile there. Thank you.
Sure. Yes, I had my headphones on, and then I had to take them off because he just started crying. He woke up from the car ride, as all babies do.
Right. So yes, and I see you sent us some information. Well, you sent me a couple documents. It was a link. Let me go back to my inbox. I saw there was a couple attachments.
Yeah, I do also have it. If you want to share, make me a co-host. But
yes.
I know we had problems with that before. So
well, the last time I think we weren't set up for that, so I think we should be able to do that this time. Let me let's see.
great. Oh, I see it right here that I can share the screen automatically. So it's not a problem.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, first and foremost, I super want to thank Bob for following up with us about this. We had mentioned it at the last meeting where we just talked about our different funding streams. And, you know, we've gotten a little bit more clarity ourselves and a few more instructions. And I think this is the perfect group to, one, respond, but also kind of spread the information among different constituent groups and CBOs in your communities about responding as well. So I'm going to overview this quickly, and then just also talk about like why we chose the questions that we did. So, so the comments are due by 5 p.m. on May 1st. And there's a couple of different ways you can respond. There's via email at digital equity. Here's the email. There's a rulemaking portal at regulations.gov. You can also submit via snail mail, or comments using a what's the docket number? Oh no, this is the docket number that you should put, because they actually, the NTIA website has a number of RFCs on a lot of different priorities. So that should be like in your subject line. And then you can also attend a listening session. They are hosting 4 nationally. The next 2 coming up are next Monday, April 24th, and then April 28th, which I believe is Friday. These are going to be just kind of facilitated for all types of community stakeholders. I'm not sure how they're going to be organized, but you can submit probably via the chat and also through conversation. We personally don't know what like the attendance or whatever will be like that at those events. This is a helpful link, and I'm also going to just put the link to this in the chat as well. We sent this to Bob, so he'll be able to forward all the information to you guys, but I'll just put it in the chat right now too. Oh, I can't do that while I'm sharing, but I'll do it after. So the NDIA, which is the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, separate from the NTIA, which is the National Telecommunications and Information Association, or the Government Association, well, they both are, I think, held a webinar where they kind of simplified all of the questions. There's a total of 24 numeric questions, but some of them have multiple parts. And but this is like the simplified, easy version. So you can click on that live link to see the webinar. And my recommendation also is if you have an idea of what questions you want to answer, just like numerically, which I'll show you down there, you can just mute it and kind of skip to that question. And you can answer any portion of the question. So it doesn't have to be the main question. It could be one of the bulleted items underneath. The instructions do request evidence, or how would you evidence this, or what evidence is supporting. I specifically asked the NTIA if, like, what did they mean by evidence? Were they looking at like academic research, government or systemic or systems kind of documentation or program stuff? And they said anything as simple as user experience, so personal experience or experience as evidence through your work. So if you were a CBO providing digital literacy courses and wanted to comment on funding programs that were facilitated in languages other than English for, to prove efficacy or something like that of the dollars used, you could do that, because in your experience, teaching digital skills to someone who hasn't mastered English yet is not necessary, and also not, and is also perhaps like discriminatory, because it doesn't have to be linear, right? There's people all over the world with digital skills that do not speak English. So that's just an example. Here below that is the actual RFC. So you'll read, when you just even look at it, it's like 6 single space pages, pretty jargony language, but it's there for reference. These are the links to those following and upcoming sessions, the first of which now will start this Monday. So right here, I'm just going to break down kind of what they're asking for feedback from. They're asking feedback on 3 areas of the Digital Equity Act. The first is the State Digital Equity Planning Grant Program, which are funds that have already been distributed to each state. This is to execute the statewide digital equity plans. We, MBI, are currently in the process of designing the framework for that engagement within, all of our communities throughout the entire state. Those funds have already been distributed, and they are questions 1 through 7 on that RFC, and MBI is going to answer those. My manager, Josh, encourages people to submit comments on those as well as the competitive grant program, because that will help determine, some of the thinking on how we plan to administer the second funding stream, which are the capacity grants. So the capacity grants are going to be a total of 1.44 billion that will be distributed like in a formula. We don't know what that yet is or how much we will be awarded, but that's going to go to each state based on the statewide digital equity plan that we provide. That plan, we're going to engage all of you, lots of community partners. We're taking a human-centered approach toward that to ensure that we're reaching and accessing nuanced information about each of the target populations. And I want to just highlight here that this is not BEAD dollars. BEAD dollars are separate from the Digital Equity Act dollars. And then the third group of funding, which is what I believe is probably most relevant for this group as a whole, and perhaps individually to respond on, and also to forward to your CBOs, your adult education providers, like all of your networks to respond to, are the digital equity competitive grants. This is 1.25 billion that is going to be dispersed directly to eligible applicants. And then below here, I've just highlighted, these are all the different groups that are eligible for this money. So it's basically going to be like an open RFQ, but at a federal level. And they will be accepting partnership applications. We, meaning MBI, are specifically not eligible because we're administering the other 2 funding streams. Any questions so far?
Yeah,
I can't see everybody, so.
that's
Sure.
Um,
Who is, I'm trying to get my screen back open to see
Oh,
who's commenting.
I think that was Carl.
this
Oh,
is
yeah.
Carl.
Okay.
The second grant category that
The capacity
MBI,
grants, yes.
yeah, it says that's federal fiscal years 22 through 26. So has part of that already been dispersed?
No, it hasn't. Not it has not. Well, it has not. I don't know if what they're including in that. Yeah, it's not the 60 million, but nobody's gotten, maybe another state has. I don't know. I don't believe so, because it's based on the statewide digital equity plans. So in the RFC list, like that may have been the timeline that they provided, but we have till July to finish our statewide digital equity like engagement. But certainly not to us, and I don't believe overall none of it has been spent. I think
Okay.
that was like an anticipated time
And
frame.
when should we expect the Commonwealth's digital equity plan to appear publicly in draft?
So we have not even, so we have to post it for public review and comment for 30 days after completion and submission. So I'm not 100% sure on whether MBI will. I feel that we're not going to be able to complete it and provide the review before submission. We're going to complete it, submit it, and then have the open the open public review comment period.
So
So that would be probably late summer, July, August. I'm thinking July, August, and we'll be in open communication too, like if we need to wait for some further instruction from them first. They just said, it's in the RFC. They just said that we need to have open review and commenting for 30 days after submission.
Okay,
And just
but-
because of the way the timeline is falling, I don't think we'll be able to do it prior to submission. We have not yet started it. We're just getting approval on our framework and approach from Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. But we'll be very much on the ground soliciting like help from all of you and community partners for those engagement efforts.
Okay, input early is certainly then better than commenting on a final draft.
Yeah, that's exactly, my intention is to make sure that we're hearing directly from residents and all of, the Commonwealth, because it can't be just a working group of 35 not super diverse people making a decision on how we spend these funds and create plans and programs, for the entire Commonwealth.
So you were talking about the legislature there?
Okay, so let me just scroll back down to where I was before. Okay. So the third funding stream is this competitive grant program. I think I went through that. So all of you, as political subdivisions, municipalities, housing providers, et cetera, are eligible. I also feel strongly that like a lot of federal funding that has come through, partnerships are going to be, in the competitive process are going to be more competitive. So if you guys are thinking of, areas where you can align like as the group that you are and with other municipalities that are, in close proximity to you, some thoughts around that, early on, I think would behoove you. And listed below are the 7 target populations. And I just also want to highlight that there's a couple of subcategories for BEAD funding, even though this isn't about BEAD, but that include women, BIPOC demographic, religious minorities, and also we have incarcerated here, religious minorities, BIPOC, and LGBTQ plus are listed in the underrepresented of these target populations. So, and this is FYI stuff. So the questions on the capacity grants, which are numbered 1 through 7, we are submitting responses to all of those. More specifically, probably 1, 2, 6, and 7, because those provide a little bit of insight into longer term, they're asking, well, like, how would we, what types of tools and resources should we provide for efficacy and also for reporting? We are also going to respond to question number 2, which does regard like how the capacity grants are spent and aligned with BEAD dollars, which are for the broadband, equity, access and deployment, more infrastructure type stuff. And then these were questions that we determined would be helpful for all partners. Everyone of course is welcomed and encouraged to answer whatever, any and all, but these were some that we just thought were, would have, a greater impact for recipients regarding digital equity being achieved. And so 5 and 6, these are overall for the capacity grants. But this is about measuring equity in the way that the state capacity grants are administered. And then 8 through 23 are more about the competitive grants. So, and these are just little notes that I had taken. 8 and 9 asked about, what does success look like and types of projects that should be funded under the competitive program. I would think this is also just, those are a good opportunity to talk about like different tools for success measures. Number 10 is good for organizations and anchors that would create tools, apps, and devices for assistance in digital work, as well as assistive technology for any particular demographic, disabled, aging, etc., not including ISPs. 17 and 21, I think I couldn't find my notes on, but I noted that they would be helpful. 23 is good for anyone doing training providers from your adult basic education, community schools, CBOs doing ABE, and would be particularly helpful for your workforce boards. And 24 is really a question about, how do we ensure that youth is being represented, and with a particular focus also on like creating workforce opportunities for youth. So I think anyone serving or, it's about economic development, right? So we can't leave our future workforce, our current and future workforce out of it. So that's the gist. As I said, the NDIA, the link up here is, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and, oh, there's my bar for my chat. And I'm going to share this link in the chat as well. Yes, baby.
Well, I'm going to say that it's your son, right?
Yeah, he's so good.
Oh my God, what incredible patience. Yeah.
He's like really such a good baby. I say that he's my reward for like all of the effort I've put into adult relationships. I just got this like awesome baby. So let me see. There's a Q&A. So I'll put the link into the
Yes.
Q&A.
Yes, that's perfect.
And we did send that doc to you.
Okay.
I want to just open the floor for questions from you guys. It's funny, I think that Zoom knows he's like a young person because it's like covering his face.
I wonder if your background is
Oh, that's true
it
too.
might
It
be
is blurred.
proximity to the screen. I wonder, my question would be, would MBIA be willing to share with us what you anticipate commenting on in the questions 1, 2, 6, and 7? And would it be helpful if in that particular area or any other area that you would see some comments from this group?
That's a great question. I am not 100. I don't have an answer for that, but I can circle back with my team and send you a response tomorrow.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah.
Anybody else with questions at this time? After we let you go, I think we're going to talk a little bit about, who might have some expertise in this area or be willing to take the lead in trying to pull comments together, and, how much interest there is from the group. But this has been tremendously helpful, and really do appreciate your time to pull this together for us and keep us in the loop.
Sure. I think, it'd be really good to reach out to like your community schools, right? Because what's the biggest issue that we've seen when, in open RFPs, like from the feds, right? Is that they are so inaccessible to the people doing the work. I would also encourage you guys to like forward this to foundations, your local bank foundations, as well as like I'm planning to send it to Philanthropy Mass as well as the Boston Foundation. But the more people they hear from, like the better. So I know that like Chelsea has like strong ties and connections, to the Boston Foundation. So you guys want to.
Not really. United Way might be a better choice or an additional choice.
Great. So yeah, I think doing that, because these are services that are, or service providers that are like in touch with the community all the time. And another just concern, that I've elevated to MBI is that, okay, so, right, we want a voice that like they should truly be accessible to those providing direct services, but also speaking on the reporting requirements, because reporting requirements are such a bear. I mean, even for an entity like MBI that's used to dealing with all of this. So, they ask about that. What types of tools and resources? There is one question about like, how can NTIA like ensure about like digital literacy skills? And there is this program that I learned about that the US Department of Ed has, which does, they did a small sampling of the nation with 20,000 people. So imagine like 50 states plus, and then territories, and probably of 20,000 people, but it's called the OECD survey. And it's the North Star, and there's also the North Star Digital Literacy Assessment. So perhaps if everyone's speaking kind of the same language on, oh, well, how about giving us funding to purchase this? I heard that it's like around, just for the digital skills portion, like $2 million to purchase. But if we were to purchase it or be able to purchase it at a state level and have like a level and uniform way, it tests skills like in a more kind of gamified real life circumstance way, instead of like a question answer test anxiety provoking method. That might be something where we could actually, like, as a state and across the nation, quantify like, oh, okay, like people are able to apply for social benefits, etc. So
But I was going to just interject one point. I know Sean has his hand raised, but just I wanted to comment on something you just said, Cheryl. First, I'm familiar with the Department of Education's program. There are other programs out there that don't cost nearly that much money, and some are actually open source. But to your one point that I think is so critical, and that is the reporting requirements related to many of the programs that have been coming out. One in particular was the Emergency Connectivity Fund that was provided from the FCC directly to K-12 education institutions. And so many school systems have actually backed out of that particular program that actually provides critical resources for connectivity. But because of the burden regarding reporting requirements and having to save records for a period of 10 years, so many of these institutions have backed out. So yeah, I second your point that it is imperative that we as individual municipalities raise the awareness regarding these ridiculous reporting requirements, because so many entities just don't have the resources to be able to handle that much in terms of the burdensome related to it. Anyway, Sean has his hand raised.
Yes, Sean, go ahead. Sean
I
Gonzo.
appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, question on the capacity grants. So people like, say, municipalities or what have you get these capacity grants. Could those funds be used to do things like enroll people in ACP?
So, okay, so it's the competitive grants that municipalities are eligible for. The capacity grants would be dollars that go to MBI, and then we would end up determining what types of programming they could fund. When they're available, I'm sure that ACP will continue to be a priority. So I'm assuming so. We currently, under the state dollars that we have available through the partnerships program, ACP is a priority. We're going to speak in our questions and review of like just the Digital Equity Act to kind of continued support for ACP because it's currently slated to end in 2024. And we know what happens, right? It's like cable TV. It's like free until everybody has it, then nobody can afford it, and they're just burdened with another bill.
Right. I mean, yeah, the funds will probably run out next summer without another appropriation. But I guess I was just thinking more in terms of like immediate, as you know, laying that aside and assuming that there will be some funding mechanism for ACP moving forward. You know, one of the things that we're finding across the country is a need for digital navigators and how important school districts and housing authorities can be in simplifying the process of enrolling people in ACP and providing kind of like it's incredibly difficult for individuals to enroll in ACP. There's been a lot of success around like getting certification letters from school districts that, you know, look, everybody in this school or everybody in this low income housing building is qualified for ACP, and therefore, you know, it can streamline the process. And I was just wondering if there was any grant money that might be available for towns that are looking to boost enrollment.
So yes, so right now through our partnerships program, I feel like almost every partner that has applied. I can't disclose all of that. Soon there'll be a grant announcement on the first cohort that got approved, but we have encouraged, there is an application in for an entity that applied for the FCC grant, like the city of Boston applied for the the city of Boston also applied for the FCC grant, and I believe that there may be another round of that coming. I just connected with the outreach and engagement person from the FCC the week before last. So, and we do understand that it's cumbersome in a lot of different ways. You know, with the biggest challenge also happening at, you know, like after enrollment. Once people have that down, then it's like getting it actually applied to someone's bill. So, which we learned today through like a statewide like practitioners group. Where you were at that group, Sean, right?
What today?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
Probably somebody else from our group, from ILSR was, but no, I wasn't.
Okay. That the ISPs, the ones that are in each service area, are doing attendance to more streamline the actual application of the subsidy to people's bills. They need a lot more lead time than ACP outreach efforts like have currently afforded us, but we're hoping that you know, we're hoping for it to improve, but we know that we're going to continue to fund with whatever dollars that we get, you know, ACP enrollment, because it's also one of the better ways, not the best, but a good way to like evidence, you know, efficacy, even though we really don't have a strong, we know that it's not foolproof because many people get enrolled, and if they don't make that connection with their ISP in 30 days, then you have to re-enroll. Another thing that I just want to share on that is that through the connection with the FCC and also in some communication with DTC between MBI and them, there's the opportunity to do train the trainers on ACP enrollment. So the community workers, community volunteers, digital navigators, etc., as well as actually have them attend sessions like ACP enrollment sessions for them to actually do the enrollment, and you just kind of gather the people.
So I think we're hopefully we can let Cheryl go soon, because I think that your son's patience has been extraordinary, but I think it's wearing thin for you. So
Yes,
and
yes.
it's been great. One question, and we can follow up later with you, Cheryl, on this.
Sure.
Does it make sense for us to submit comments as a group, or should we really be doing that individually?
I think whatever is gonna work best for you guys. I think there's power in showing, like a coalesced group, and they also, of course, are gonna post all the comments and feedback. So, but I would say in the interest of not duplicating efforts, that perhaps you guys do like, divide and conquer, like this way you get the most questions, and as long as you're in alignment, which you are already in alignment on a lot of other things, I think you should, that's
Okay.
a recommendation, a suggestion.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a somewhat the short time that we have to get through this and understand, and we're talking about outreaching to people in the community and getting feedback. It's going to be probably difficult for us to really make sure we're all aligned on what comments to go out there, and probably would have to see if there's someone could take a leadership role in this and draft some questions, and then we could circulate them to the group, and whatever if like one of the members is interested in signing on to it, we might have to do it that way, as opposed to, we have people that weren't even on the call tonight that, we just need to, we can't just send something on behalf of all the communities if we don't get their buy-in. So we'll have to think about how that will work, but
Correct.
appreciate
And maybe you could also, right, just, put the questions and the answer that you guys have. And, depending on like your relationships with the different community entities and stuff, say if you agree or if you want to change an item, do that and then send it to this email. I think,
Yeah.
I think with limited capacity across like everywhere, it kind of makes it like a petition in a sense. And as long as people are in alignment, they'll sign off.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And speaking of signing off, we'll let you go, and we're going to close out here in just a few minutes ourselves anyways, but
Thank you. Say
just
adios,
better.
Xavier.
Thanks,
Say
Cheryl.
Xavier,
Okay.
all right.
Bye-bye, Xavier.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Great
you're
job.
Thank you
fantastic.
so
Thanks
much.
again. Appreciate it. All right, so we have about 7 minutes left in our meeting, and this is a very complex issue, and I don't feel like I'm gonna have the capacity to pull this all together myself without a significant help from someone that's on the call tonight, or someone else that may step forward from the group. So I'm hoping that someone here has a passion for this and might be willing to kind of lead the effort on putting at least some, comments together, and not missing this opportunity. Is there any?
I can help, but I don't think I can do this alone, just based upon my time limitations. So I'm hoping that there would be somebody else that might be able to work together, or even set up some follow-on call where there's maybe myself and 2 or 3 other people, so that we can go through the questions together. I know that I have particular answers that I've thought of, but I think we need to discuss them as at least as a subset of a smaller group. And then go on. So I'm willing to help, but I can't do this alone.
Sure, and I likewise am willing to help, but I feel like you seem to have a lot of expertise already in a lot of these things, and working with the city, and I think there's a good fit there. But is anybody else from New Bedford, or I see also Brian's on. I don't know if you have any interest in that, or any other community that wants to participate if we set up a meeting to discuss this.
Yeah, I think we need multiple communities.
Yeah, my evenings are filling up for the rest of the month, but and my days are pretty full, but if I can fit it in.
Yeah,
I'll-
and maybe there's an opportunity for us to, you know, if you can't make a particular meeting, maybe your emails exchanges might also work, you know, if we.
That's true.
Oh,
know-
I'm like hundreds of emails behind. That'll be even worse.
Well, whatever, you know, is best, we'll try
Yeah.
to shoot for it, but, okay, so, I'm not hearing anybody else at the moment. What we'll do is circulate, at least Sean and I will agree to set up a meeting and invite Carl, and then, you know, we'll circulate it to the rest of the group who, you know, anybody that didn't make it onto this call tonight could still, participate. I'll circulate the links, that, were copied into the chat, and I will also, when it comes to this other meeting, you know, highlight Cheryl's comments and documents, and then ask the general membership in the coalition if anybody else is interested in joining. You know, hopefully Carl and Sean Gross and myself.
Yeah,
on a
Bob,
call.
I would just stress the importance of input into this process. Just because it will define some of the rulemaking that goes on. And, you know, one of the points that Cheryl brought up that I seconded, which was related to the reporting requirements, as well as the actual application requirements. So if both of those are burdensome, all that's going to do is it's going to deter many of us from even be willing to engage in the application process,
Mhm.
which, you know, again, I've seen millions and millions of dollars just go unused in the ECF program, which really provided a lot more than ACP ever did. And I guess I just don't want to see that happen here again.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we have to bear in mind, I think when, you know, if we don't have the capacity to answer a lot of questions, or, you know, we don't have an interest in answering a lot of questions, even if we focus on one or two particular areas like that and just say, this is, you know, this is a strong interest for our group to, you know, make sure. And I think that's the kind of thing that's hard to argue against, you know, right? So if we say this is a focus, we just don't want to make it, you know, the reporting so burdensome that no one's going to want to do it. It's going to be hard to think that anyone that's a member of this coalition would find that controversial or not want to sign on to it. So that might be helpful. Courtney, go ahead.
I have to jump off, but you know, keep me in the loop, and I'll be in your next meeting. And I did take the liberty of forwarding all.
Oh, I think we're losing you. The screen froze up.
Must be a Comcast connection.
Right, right, exactly. That's a great argument for FalmouthNet.
Yeah. Well, I will follow up with Courtney to see what he was trying to convey to us here, but unless anyone else has any other comments or questions, I think we did make it through our agenda. And you know, only other thing I had on here was next meeting guest speaker. If anyone has, or agenda topics, if anyone has anything of interest that you think we should be trying to cover, or any guest speakers you want to recommend, by all means, just forward that to me and I'll try to coordinate that. And then next meeting date and time. I mean, I think maybe we'll try to do the same thing, you know, send a poll and see, trying to target whatever works best for the, you know, the most people. So it may not be on exactly the same schedule next month, but in fact, we will not be, from my perspective, because I will not be in the country at the end of next month. So so we'll have to work something out either a little earlier in the month or early in June. But I'll communicate with you all on that. So, all right, we're right at 6:30. So thank you everyone for participating, and I'll circulate notes and we'll circulate this video as well.
And
Thank you, Bob. And I'm going to send you an email with all of those links.
Perfect.
Sean,
Thank you.
thank you
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your input. This was really valuable tonight.
Oh,
having
thank
you
you.
here.
Good.
And
Yeah.
Bob, thanks for organizing this meeting. This was a really, really fruitful meeting. So I appreciate all of your help.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
And
so much.
Maria comments
Ditto.
and Courtney, I believe is the one, or Art, one of the two from Falmouth were the ones that recommended Sean Gonzalez, as a speaker here. So thank them for that. And yeah, we'll sign off and look forward to the next meeting. Thanks everyone. Bye now.
Thank you. Have a
Great
good evening.
job. Thank you.